This is Rob Dunlavey, who was the 2017 recipient of the Gold Bransom Illustrator Award for his book Owl Sees Owl. And
which is on the back table there.
I have a copy back there along with some of his others. He's here on his first visit to Jackson. And this week he's visited Coulter and Jackson and Alta elementary schools. So he had a lot of fun working with the kids who have told us they loved.
We run them ragged. They're exhausted.
They've said they love making some folded paper owls and paper plate owls and playing palindromic word games inspired by the poetry from Owl Sees Owl. So.
I got all that. Good.
Yeah. So please join me in welcoming Rob Dunlavey.
Yes, thank you.
So that's like the professional side of me. I'm a children's book illustrator, and like you said, there's some things back on the table. I've been an artist my whole life. My training is in art, although I do have some science background and botany mostly. Midwestern flora, so maybe Eastern flora, so I'm not that familiar with things here. I've actually spent some time doing archaeology as well on the fieldwork side, conducting surveys and doing mapping and cataloging artifacts and things like that. So I kind of like hanging around with people who study life as we know it and life as we imagine it, perhaps, but with an objective kind of view that scientists do. And I think, maybe I bring some of that into my own artwork. And so if you look at that stuff, you'll see. All that is kind of a setup to say that all my training about, or my background of working with visitors in museums is as a volunteer, just like almost all of you. Probably all of you, because you couldn't. We're all volunteers because we do something that we're kind of passionate about, and for all kinds of reasons, it's really a great payoff. So we do it. So the talk what I'll say, my remarks, my talk that I sort of structured, it's going to be somewhat anecdotal and personal, but I'll reflect upon what I think are the strengths of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts Accessibility Program. And I realize every institution is different, so this is all just kind of knowledge dust that can kind of settle down and perhaps get incorporated into the structures that you're going to build. Because I think you already do it already. And as if nothing else, as populations age, as our world becomes more and more, our neighbors grow closer to us, there's more people, your museum continues on with its mission, and those people, you want them to come here, you want them to feel welcomed here. And welcoming people with disabilities is easy, as you probably know, because I think the basic impulse with an educational institution like this that has a collection of art that people come to see, it's a magnet, it's a draw, is that you're kind of in the hospitality business, right? But with a twist. You're not making sure there's soaps and shampoo in the bathroom and people are checking in and out, but you are making people feel welcome. You are attendant to their needs, whatever they are. They need a bathroom, they need a stroller, they need to find the elevator. So immediately you go to them and you provide whatever help you can. And that's, some volunteers have it, it's just what they do, they're always sort of giving out like that. Others maybe less so, and they find different places to be of service in the museum. But that is the basic thing. You're hospitable, you're kind, you're attentive to people where they are in that moment as they're presented to you. And that can be wildly different from person A in January and person A in March may be totally different. They might have a degenerative vision condition. They might have suffered some sort of traumatic injury in that time. They may be, maybe their meds have changed. Their behaviors may be different from one visit to the next. They may just be passing through for the summer. You see them one day in the summer and you see them next year in the summer and it's like, whoa, what happened to March? Maybe she's gone through something. How can we meet her? So training is really good and very important, but also just kind of these really basic bedrock curiosity about people and wanting to serve them. They've come to you with a very specific purpose. They want to see your museum. They love you already before they've walked in the door. You know, so it's win-win all around. And let's see, I have to kind of really just speaking off the cuff here. So, yes, thoughtfulness. All the tours that we do at the MFA are what we call visitor-centered. It sounds kind of vague and kind of obvious, but in practice, it's a requirement. Absolutely a requirement. Someone comes in as blind and you ask them if they want a hearing aid. It's visitor-centered. I mean, that's a dumb example. But that's the kind of thing. It's sort of that common sense I talked about. A friend of mine asked me, before I started doing this in 2012, a friend of mine, I love going to museums, a friend of mine asked me if I was interested in giving tours to blind people, disabled people. I said, sure. So she kind of got me involved in it. And I started training. The training lasted about a year, a couple sessions a month with some kind of events sort of in the intervals in between, where I gradually began to learn some of the real basics of the populations that we would be dealing with. So it's the knowledge base is a gradual accretion of experience with a lot of training that kind of, I don't know, I'm like 60 almost, I won't say which side, and it just, you learn by experience, and those things come in, I study, I read, and whatever, but it takes a while for those things to become kind of habitual parts of how you behave as a guide. I'm sure there's all different tenures here of people who've been guiding a long time, and some may be a shorter time in different capacities. But if you do really embark on this with a real sense of diligence for yourself, like you really want to be part of an accessibility kind of focus in your guiding, just be patient with yourself and get lots of experience. I went through this training, I immediately signed up for every tour I could. And I'm kind of still doing that, but it was just because I really wanted to learn, and I knew the only way I could learn was just by doing it. And you do some dumb things, hopefully no dangerous things, because that's a definite possibility. I remember one tour, it was a Saturday morning, the museum was packed. I had this fairly young mother, probably in her 30s, who was blind. She had a working dog, service dog, and two young children who were sighted. One was 3, the other was 5, 2 girls. It's a recipe for confusion. I mean, let alone if we all have sight. You get these 2 little kids who have a completely different way of relating to a museum. So yes, they touched something they weren't supposed to touch. I actually led them across a courtyard in the museum that has many levels and different surfaces to walk on: gravel, concrete, grass, corners and angles and steps. It was like crossing the Delaware. It was like crossing the Gobi. It was like, how can I get to the other side as quickly as possible? Because I got into that experience and I realized, here I am guiding her. She's holding onto my arm, but there's this dog, and there are these kids doing this, and the kid needed chicken fingers or something. It was lunchtime all of a sudden, right? So that was just like being in the moment. It's nice to laugh about it, but when I think it could have been just really disastrous. So just somebody trips, got a blind lady, you got anyway. So I don't think anybody can do it perfectly. Anyway, so since 2012 I've been doing these tours, and the tours are for any individual or any group that schedules a tour. Sometimes we're there and someone presents themselves at the front desk and they're blind, they're with their aide or whatever, and they just thought it was interesting. And so sometimes there's like a drop-in kind of thing like that. But usually they're scheduled through a coordinator. The MFA has a dedicated staff person full-time who is the manager of accessibility. Besides just managing the program, She also has to deal with all the governmental code, the Americans with Disabilities Act, all those kinds of things. So she's in conversation with curators and with the architects and the designers who are creating exhibits. You know, have you ever been in the exhibit and there's that little tiny bar, you know, that keeps you from, you know, bumping into the sculpture, you know? Well, if you're blind, your cane isn't even gonna, you know, touch, and you're not even gonna know it. So this is all these kinds of things she has to kind of be aware of. We have a part-time person who actually schedules the groups and coordinates the volunteers. So it's a very different animal. The museum there, Boston's been around for 130 years or so. The access program's been in place for about 20 plus or minus years. It's gone from being very nebulous and reactive to the needs of the community to being a real organization. There's about 60 volunteer guides in the access program. When I started, there were only 30. So right now it's like really grown, and we've been able to accept more groups. Other things about that program. Well, I'll just launch into this, so this will kind of make sense. I mentioned the Americans with Disabilities Act. Obviously, government law, all buildings are already doing this, right? You've got the bathrooms, you've got rails, you've got ramps, you've got elevators, you've got maybe doors that are power assist doors. All that kind of stuff is thanks to the Americans with Disabilities Act. It sets up, what's wonderful about it is besides just all the physical things that come with it, it kind of sets us up already. It's like this little push on the back that says, these people are welcome. You know, so it's your job to welcome them. Have a seat. Hi, I'm Rob. Elizabeth. Glad you're here. The other thing with this, well, I'll just read this. So as the population ages, a greater percentage of visitors experience forms of disability. Right? Some of you are laughing ruefully. That's true. And these people may be long-term supporters, and have been, of your institution. Why wouldn't you go the extra mile to begin to create programs where they can be integrated in their current and future states into the life of the museum? So, you know, you do the math. It's a really important demographic to enfold into your life. So, disabled visitors. So let's see, I'm just going to run this down and we'll see what comments. So visitors may have behavioral or cognitive disabilities. Some of you talked about some transitional homes or
we've had kids from Jackson Behavior Therapy, which is kids after school programs and they have summer day camps.
So this can really balloon because there's a whole population out there that you may never see. Okay, they're in rehab, all different kinds of rehab, from substance abuse to they're getting over some injury perhaps, or they have cognitive disabilities. In my day, I hate to use the word, we called them retarded. To just like put a name on it. There's behavioral anomalies, issues, disabilities, whatever you want to call it. Okay, they don't conform to our modes of behavior. They have a totally different experience of reality. We can learn from that. So they're special. Okay, but they take some understanding of what their conditions are. And like I said at the beginning, I'm a volunteer, I'm an artist, I've learned this stuff sort of on the job. And some of you may have really deep personal involvement with some of these issues, so I hope I'm not glossing over that or not insulting, but so just bear with me. The other thing, traumatic events, someone's in a car accident, boom, they lose half their brain, they want to come to the museum 2 years later. Yes, 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 come to our museum, we want you here. We want to be part of your growth into whatever the new chapter in your life is. right? Why not? Just do it. You have resources. Other groups that well, I should say the other thing too is with disabilities is that if a person says they have a disability, they do. You never ask them, well, how blind are you? Right? Right? You don't do it. Part of their situation, maybe they're in a substance abuse treatment program. Maybe they're homeless. They're part of some larger entity, and part of their therapy, part of their progress is going out as a group into public settings that may make them very uncomfortable. Think of returning vets. Right? We had that exhibit of John Singer Sargent watercolors at the museum. Whole gallery was just filled with hundreds of these beautiful paintings. It was very crowded. I took a group of vets down there and immediately turned around and said, we're not going in there. There's just too many people. You know, we went and looked at Egyptian art instead. Anyway, so it's not like a disability, I mean, but it is. It comes in through the special accommodations that we make for people. So disabilities may not be apparent whatsoever. However the person or group identifies, you simply go with that. No questions asked. Sometimes you do have to ask questions. When I'm setting up a tour, I email the staff that's bringing the group, and I say, well, okay, so are there any other things that I need to plan for? Do you need wheelchairs? Or do you need a rollator or a walker? Do you need assistive listening devices? How, what sort of stamina do you think your group has? So I can plan a tour that doesn't wear them out. I've been on some tours where the staff was great. We reached a certain point, and all of a sudden she's just like, her eyes are big as a deer. She says, we have to sit down. You know, it wasn't clear to me that there were people in her group that were getting tired, and we hadn't gone more than, like, from the front desk to this room. You know, that sort of distance. So things like that you try to know beforehand, but the staff realizes that you're doing it for safety, for comfort, for what's appropriate for that group. The other thing that the MFA does, like I said, it reaches out to groups like the homeless veterans or other sort of community groups or people are in a different kind of therapy, have a different hill to climb every day. And also, disabilities can be extremely complex. I do a group from the Perkins School for the Blind, so many of those students have varying levels of blindness, but some are autistic. You know, some have, some physical disabilities that change the way they walk or the way they comport themselves in the museum. That's really important to know. And some are, they're charming, but it's never just one thing. So once again, visitor-centered, the whole person. We also, maybe you do it here, I don't know, if you have a school group come in, perhaps you've made arrangements with the school beforehand. They have a child with disabilities that's side by side or mainstream in their group. You might attach yourself to that group as their special aid. Maybe you're a sighted guide for them. Maybe they take longer, or maybe they're using some technology to access the artwork somehow. You know, you would be the person to kind of help do that. So you're sort of embedded within a larger group that the student's usually very comfortable being in. And so you want to be there, but that's a little different than doing a tour kind of a thing. I don't know. I mean, there's all different ways that museums do things. All right. Hey, Sue. All right, so I've always liked going to museums. I've always done it from a kid. My training in fine arts, any city I go to the museums. And like I said, a friend of mine asked me. I was interested in doing this. So I came at it from an artistic background. What's interesting, and I imagine if we did a little survey here, your backgrounds are all over the map, right? Some of you maybe live here half the year, I don't know. Some of you recently moved here for retirement. Some of you maybe work you're a teacher. Maybe you're an artist, I don't know. Very few of our access guides are artists. Very few have art history. Very few have art education. They come from all kinds of backgrounds. A lot of them do, being Boston, there's some people who are in the medical, they have a medical background, or in therapeutic backgrounds for different kinds of populations, geriatric patients, or things like that. But just sort of personally, you know, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's being an artist where you're so visual. There's a sense of me, and it's sort of deep and goes back a long ways. It's sort of a bit of guilt, a little bit, about being sighted and sort of wondering what it's like to be non-sighted. And it focused on sight, you know, because that's the sort of the most obvious disability we often think of for some reason. And it's not the most obvious. But so there's like a personal element in my interest in accessibility, you know, that kind of personal thing. Maybe I could read for a blind person someday. What would that be like? You know, I remember reading a book about Louis Braille when I was a kid, and somehow it stuck with me. It stuck in some place, and it seemed to have sort of led to this. So, you know, maybe you have personal stories, and maybe family members or friends who have a disability, or maybe you witnessed something at one point in your life that kind of made you more sensitive to some of the complexities of how people with disabilities actually live in the world. So I'll talk about the tours themselves. So I was telling Jane, I think, or maybe it was Lisa, the training for my group of guides was approximately like 8 or 9 months. And, you know, you do a tour on verbal description. You do a tour, you do classes and exercises, you know, just learning how to describe things. Like a painting. How would you describe this painting to someone who couldn't see it? Or this piano, or this lamp, or this. You know, it's possible to describe anything. You lend somebody your eyes. Lori.
Question. When you're doing those for a sighted person, to me the first question I would ask is, have they ever seen before or not?
I wondered that.
Yeah. You might get cues from them, anecdotal cues, but it's really not about asking them. I don't know, it may be different for different institutions and different programs, but that's something that we're said is completely off limits. You don't even go there. It's a natural instinct to kind of want to, and so I probe. Like I've got this one visitor, and it's like we get really close to things, and I go like, oh, she can see this fine. She can see these details. But there's other things going on. We walk into a gallery that has bright lights. You know, she'll get a migraine. She can't see anything. You go into, you know, she can't maybe see down to her feet. You know, she might see in high contrast. She might see in, I mean, it's so hard to predict where some people will see tunnel vision. They'll just see like, you know, I can see Ron's ear, but I can't see his other ear. It's all just like fuzz, you know, so you just learn by doing. You know, you can't like do an eye test. And, anyway, you know. But you might sort of talk to me. You say, "Have you been to the museum before?" You know, and they might say, "Well, you know, I used to go to all the museums. I remember a wonderful trip I took to Rome, and I saw the Vatican, and then this and that, you know." And they might even say, "And then, you know, I lost my vision for some reason." So you may get things like that, but usually it's all pretty gray. In between, it's not like a switch that flips on and off disability. It's really a gradient. So you just celebrate the gradientness of life, and you just kind of go with it and be their friend and be hospitable, be all those things that you're supposed to be doing anyway. And you know, you know how to ask questions in a way that brings people along rather than maybe puts them on guard. I say I give about 5 to 7 tours a month. Sometimes it's even more. Sometimes it's a bit less. Some weeks it's jam-packed with things. I'm a volunteer. I don't know. I make the time for it. It's nuts. It kind of impinged on Owlsey's Owl, actually, when I was completing that book. There was just like this crush of things going on at the museum. Of course, I'm like signing up for everything, right? So anyway, so I'll say like 5 to 7 tours a month. I'm leading 5 to 7 tours a month. It sort of doesn't sound like that much when I say it. But each tour requires probably a couple hours to plan. I'm working with an assistant, so I need to support them in my tours. You know, what are our roles going to be on the tour? I would say that one-on-one tours are great if they're one-on-one. But, you know, if you have even 3 or 4 people, you know, if your attention is divided a lot, then you can run into some problems, depending on the behavior of some individuals in your group. So it's also a great training thing. New volunteer comes in the museum, hey, can you join, you know, Lori for this tour? All I want you to do is open doors and make sure, you know, maybe you can carry a stool with you or something for them, or, you know, and so they don't have a lot they have to do because you're running the show, but it brings them along, and they learn by that osmosis the kinds of things to be thinking about. A lot of it is just thinking. We just don't. You just can't plan. It just has to become sort of instinct. Each tour is unique. Once in a while, I repeat a tour. If like it's sort of surprised, like it's snuck up on me. But usually every tour is unique. I have a group that comes twice a month, a group of 10 adults from kind of a day have center. They do some work training, but most of all it's kind of like babysitting in a sense. You know, there's some training, there's enrichment of various sorts. But they've been coming for about 4 years. So, you know, 12 months a year, 48, you know, you start doing the math. And luckily the Museum of Fine Arts is pretty big. It has a lot of different collections. So we can go anywhere we want to. The museum is just like a toy store for us. And it's a really good thing for me that it's a toy store. But I'll tell you in just a second why that is. But you have to get creative with your tours if you've got a group that's coming back repeatedly, what we call a partnership. It becomes what they expect. They look forward to it. It's part of their life. It's a routine. It's also part of their therapy, for lack of a better word. I was telling Lisa, you know, think about it. You're living in an assisted living center, let's say. Your day is very circumscribed. You get up, you're gotten up. You have breakfast, maybe someone feeds you. You have medications, someone times all that out. You walk down the hallway, the dining room's here. You walk down here, maybe your friend is there. You know, that's where the bridge game happens, down over there. Everything is really circumscribed. Other situations could be much more restrictive. So getting out into a space like the museum, it's freedom. It's a kind of freedom that you hope people don't forget, but they kind of do because we have to survive, and sometimes forgetting that we're free makes it life a lot more manageable. And I mean that in the most humane way, sympathetic way possible. Reclaiming part of their former life can be coming to your museum. The tours are unique. I do tours with all kinds of people. Like I said, I don't know American Sign Language, but there is a person who does a regular ASL tour, a drop-in tour. So those groups are met. I can use any object I want to in the museum, generally. And sometimes the tours include art-making activities, music, movement, writing, poetry, and even games. I did a tour on boats recently with a group, kind of like this group that I just described, these adults with cognitive and some behavioral issues. Anyway, we were doing boats. So we've got a gallery filled with model ships, right? The model ships are kind of cool. There's also a gallery of Egyptian boats. I noticed when I was preparing for the tour that there was a gallery that wasn't being used. It was just white walls and open space, no stanchions up, no one's in there. When I see those, my eyes just light up because I say, like, wow, we can move around and do some stuff in this space. So we had boat races. You know, I had a dice, and everyone got a picture of a different kind of boat. They got to select. They got to choose something. Wow, they chose something. That may not be something that they get to do all the time. They got to, you know, it's like wearing clothes, right? These are my clothes. This is me, right? So they got to choose something. We sort of had teams. I had another assistant with me, and we took the number of steps that were on the dice and go from one wall to the other. And after a while, they started getting creative and wanting to change the rules of the game and doing all that kind of stuff. So here we are in an art museum playing games. Why? We're not learning about boats, really. We're not learning about art at all, right? But we're doing a group team building, kind of. I'm getting to understand their social life between themselves. They're able to have that in a space that's foreign to them. You know, that's the connection that you're making between one world and your space. So I thought that was really worthwhile. And then we looked at some other paintings that had boats in them. And one of them is a painting called Watson and the Shark. It's by John Singleton Copley. And maybe this image will come to mind if you've been to Boston or Washington. Has a couple of these paintings. Here's this guy who's fallen overboard in Havana Harbor. He's being attacked by Jaws, you know, this big shark. Very funny shark because it has lips. And his friends are in this boat, and they're trying to spear the shark and save Watson and everything like that. Well, it's big. It's 6 feet wide by 4.5, 5 feet tall or whatever. Very dramatic painting. They're sitting on a bench like 8, 10 feet away from it. So they got a front row seat. Well, the painting is great. You know, we can talk about John Singleton Copley, but let's talk about what really matters. Let's talk about sharks. Let's talk about swimming. Let's talk about why that guy doesn't have any clothes on in the water, right? Right? That's what they're wondering. So that's where you go. Maybe I can slip in some biographical details about Watson. He lived to a ripe old age, was mayor of London for a while, was very wealthy. He met Copley on a boat. He said, I'm starting a hospital. Here's some money, but I want this painting in there to tell people not to do stupid things like this. But if they do, you might be like me. Watson, and become rich and powerful and famous and all that. So we might get some of those things in there, but a lot of it is like, what time of day is it? What's the weather? This looks like a big harbor. Look at all those ships. Where do you think this is? You know, you're far from the Havana harbor here, but you know, people can get into the basics of that scene, and you know, pretty soon the questions are generated by the group. That equals visitor-centered. They're coming at it with their own tools. And whatever those tools are, I was showing an abstract wall relief by Louise Nevelson to somebody. It's filled with these big, round circles. They were like parts of the spools that are used by linemen for tables. And it was like part of a table. And these big, round circles. And this woman walks up to Julie and she says, I see Mickey Mouse. She saw the circles, right? The ears, the face, it's all 3 circles. Walt Disney figured it out a long time ago, how to make a memorable character. That wasn't what Louise Nevelson wanted. But now whenever I see it, I see through Julie's eyes. and I'm so grateful because even, you know, what little I know about your collection here, and while things are very sort of specific and, you know, we see 2 moose in a wood that's been maybe sort of logged over with these mountains. You know, we see it very specifically of what it is. You know, someone could look at that and have a completely different sort of take on it. And you don't go, no, that's not quite right. No, I think it's spring. I don't think it's fall. It's, you know, you don't correct anybody. You take their impulse and you magnify it and go in that direction and see if you can lead them to greater expressiveness. It's really nice when that happens. You usually feel like you both made a friend. So I always look for opportunities in tours to incorporate other kinds of activities. Access guides, like myself, we're all volunteers. That's something I stress to the staff that brings our groups in, or the people who I'm interacting with, because it's also, I should sort of back up a little bit, the program at the MFA is supported by some very large interests who have lots of money, and so they're free. The tours are free, you know, admission is like $25 or something. It's free, they get member reduced parking. That's all because this largesse that we're lucky to have. But the flip side of that is if you don't pay for something, you know, you don't value it as much. So I really go to great pains, because what that means when they don't value it that much, right? I call them the day before. Yes, we'll be there. Day of, they don't show up. Something happened. You know, a van broke down, someone's out sick, whatever. They didn't make the effort to call. It just didn't quite filter down. So I always really try to stress the value, really literally the value of the volunteer. It's a complex thing, a volunteer. It's a very complex animal. Your motivations, why you do it, why you will, you'll just stay up late working on things, thinking about things. You will. Yes, a wide range of backgrounds, very few are artists. Some have disabilities themselves, of course. Right? Wouldn't that make sense? They're just like us. All right, so I'm trying to stay on track here. One thing I wanted to say, what was this? Okay, so this is my, sorry, probably while I read my sentence, it just sort of helps me. So access guides are focused on the visitor and meeting them where they are at. We aim to provide visitor-centered experiences. Those disabilities, once again, I can't stress this enough. Physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities, emotional disabilities, for lack of a better word. Like I said, some are apparent, some are not. If they identify in however, you create your expectation for the kind of interaction you're going to have with them. The program, as I experience it, strives to make the museum a welcoming, safe, supportive space, and that's more important than the art. So the tours, I said, can be for individuals or groups. They're usually arranged beforehand, so that's when it really helps to have somebody who's kind of got their little periscope out, or their telescope, or their finger, or whatever, on the pulse of the community that's out there, and they're sort of a point person. Maybe there's some marketing that's gone along with that to activate those populations out in the community, to make them realize, oh, you know, there's this program going on at the National Museum of Wildlife Art. We should do it. We should see if it works for us. You know, so then a dialogue begins, and then they schedule a visit. Some tours are drop-in, like I said. What's really important here, for obviously on the administrative level, the managerial type level, is communication. It's also super important for the volunteer who's planning the tour. You have to communicate. You need to know what the needs are going to be. That's some of those examples I gave. The nuts and bolts of the tours, there's usually, at the MFA, there's a lead guide. That would be me. I usually have one, although I have to tell you, sometimes it's really nice being just a solo guide, even with a group maybe like 8 people, because you're flexible. You can spin around, and someone says something, and you say, oh, let's go over here instead. You know, you're going to deviate from your plan because it's just more inspired, and it's more fun, and it's more creative. And like making art, you know, all those great words, fun and creativity, those kind of go together, and it happens, and that's why I do this guiding. But usually, like I said before, you have an assistant. The tours can be surveys of a particular type of art. You might say, well, we're going to look at bronze tabletop sculptures of animals from the French 19th century. You know, I don't know how many of those you have. Maybe I don't know. You probably have a lot, right? Right? Or you might say, well, we're going to look at just the Pacific Northwest, subjects. Maybe you want to learn about animals in the Pacific Northwest. I don't know. I'm making this stuff up. So you can also do a gallery survey. Like say, we're just going to do contemporary art today. We're just going to go into this gallery, and I've got like 5 or 6 pieces I want to point out to you. We're going to talk about them. We'll have this dialogue that I've sort of sketched out to you. And some of that maybe might be free time, because guess what? The whole world knows how to behave in an art gallery, right? Your visitors probably don't. They might all stay in a group. They may immediately want to sit down and just be lumps. You know, I mean, so, but they're in an art gallery, so they have to learn that it's okay to walk around and look at things. That's a learned skill, believe it or not. It really is, especially for really marginalized groups. So it's even something, and also that freedom part I talked about. Take a group of people, they've got off the van, they're in the museum, help! You know, how do we behave? What do we do? What are we supposed to do if someone's not telling them what to do? So, you know, so anyway, so that passive kind of exercise can be part of a tour. Finally, tours are, I guess, what I would call theme-based. And it's what I love to do most, and I'll tell you why. So, what's a theme? Give me a word. Just someone just shout out a word, whatever pops in your head.
Color.
Color. Okay, how about another one? That's a good one. Some really way out there.
Predator-prey relationships.
Okay, predator-prey relationships. Something really more out there.
Young animals.
No, come on, you guys, you're like, come on.
staid.
You're alive, right? Shake you up. How about kaleidoscope? How about reflections? How about a word like incandescence? Let's pick that one, because there's a lot, besides you having to define the word to people. Obviously, it can have many definitions. Well, that is like opening up the treasure storehouse. A word has so many possibilities, right? Incandescence. Well, maybe there's a painting of a forest fire, or a sunset, or a pool reflecting water, or a leaping trout with scales, you know, that are glinting in the sun. You can begin to stitch all these different things together in a tour. And I think what the theme tour, and this is why I'm like passionate about it, right, is that it can get into people's lived experience and memory quicker. If you're giving a tour based on, you know, the paintings of Albert Bierstadt, they're coming in cold. They don't know who Albert Bierstadt is. But if you do a tour on, you know, the weather last week was really crazy, well, maybe we got some paintings that will address that unpredictability that you might see in one of Bierstadt's paintings. Right? So you might even do a tour on unpredictability. You know, and you can get creative. And speaking for myself, I find that to be very enriching and rewarding. And you know, maybe I get all kind of, and you know, I get too excited about it. And hopefully, other people, if nothing else, maybe catch some of my spirit, my excitement, and come along for the ride for a little bit. Let's see, theme-based. You know, I've talked about creativity and making connections. I just think that's a really empowering thing in an art museum. I believe, and maybe you'll agree, or you'll disagree, but I think that most visitors come to museums feeling dumb, feeling stupid, feeling awkward, feeling like they're ignorant. That's a terrible feeling, but we all come ready. You go to the symphony or the opera, right? It's like you're just going to read the program and try to learn as much as you can. So you have to assume that that's not a good place to be for a person. And as an educator, as a evangelist, you might say, for the art in your institution, you want to break all that down and you want to give them, you know, here's the insurance. Here's the keys, be back at 10. You know, I want, this art museum is yours. So whatever you can do to give people ownership of the artwork is really important. If you just say we're going to look at Albert Bierstadt, you know, they might just sort of glaze over. For this population, other visitors, they're totally into that, right? Totally into it. They've studied it. They love it. They can sort of add to your tour. Maybe they can derail your tour because they love their thing so much, and they won't sort of let go of that and let other people share the stage, you might say. That happens. But making connections between things is really good. If Julie looks at Louise Nevelson and says Mickey Mouse, she's made a connection that I personally value. because the connection is everything. You want people to be connected with art. Once the artist has made the artwork, they've sold it, it's out in the world, it's in these gorgeous frames, the artist is out of the picture. You can tell their story, it's good, it might be really interesting, there might be some juicy bits there that people can relate to if they're relating on a personal level to the work. But, you know, maybe you can find another way into it that's better for them. Remember, you know, I have a lady who comes in, she can see this much, you know? Hi, this is a painting of, let's see, a piece of Linzer on a plate in a Viennese restaurant, you know? You know, or it's you know, yeah. You know, and try to connect all those different little vignettes. And then what if she's a memory loss? You know, each gallery is kind of, each gallery, the same gallery. Each corner of the painting is that corner of the painting. You know, so you got to kind of experiment and recalibrate a bit. I called cross-discipline, so we might use different kinds of experiences. Even just the simple act of walking through a space is something to work with. There's lots of stuff that you can do, and I guess, you know, some of you are taking notes and all that, and that's good. But just to be open to the total experience that a visitor has in the museum is really important for these populations. Of course, I think it'd be great for our regular able-bodied people to have boat races in the galleries. You know, I think that, or we have them do a role play based on Watson and the Shark. You know, why don't you lie down on the floor there and raise your hand up? We're going to do a tableau, you know, of the painting, you know. And there's Joe from Kansas. He's on vacation visiting his grandkids. You know, he wasn't expecting that. That might be cool if you can help him up. Right? I don't know. So flexibility is the key to success. It's not about the art. It's meeting the visitor where they are. I had a group of young adults who were very varying cognitive disabilities, ADHD, Asperger's, people with real fear of being in crowded spaces. I wasn't totally aware of it. We got into a gallery and a couple of them just started behaving strange. They kind of started backing to the edge of the group. They started turning around and not focusing on the rest of the group. They would kind of, you know, have these tick-like behaviors. And I saw the staff was like, their eyes were like darting around, trying to like, you know, connect, see what was going on. And luckily my assistant guide, who just has a cooler head, she says, you know, we just need to sit down for a while. Found a bench. We all just sat there and we just hung out. You know, here are these priceless paintings all around, these sculptures, and we're just like chilling, totally. You know, and people are kind of finding, it's like with, I hate to say it, well anyway, it's like with all of us, right? We get overwhelmed, and you need to kind of have a little time out. And that was a successful experience. That we didn't do really half of what we wanted to do. Now, one of the things, you know, I should say another thing with these tours. If a group is coming in, chances are they're going to be accompanied by maybe the staff member who drove the van. They're also staff. They work on the floor with these people, whatever it is. Maybe there's another aide. Some of these people, I don't know how to put this politely, but they're poorly paid. And they have a lot of distractions in their own life. They may not speak English. I don't know what it is around here, but in Boston, you have people from the Caribbean, from Africa, from all over, Russia, you name it. A whole United Nations of staff that work in assisted living homes, that work in these transitional rehab type situations. And so I realize that I need to support them as well. However I can do that. Maybe it's by discipline, saying, you know, please could you put your phone away unless you're having to arrange something that you need to arrange. You know, that's like giving them some structure, right? Or asking them to help out. Listen, can you hold the door? Can you make sure the door is held for these people, because it's just me, I can't hold the door. Because their clients will just march on through the door and someone will slam, you know, and then you have who knows what's going to happen. Little things like that. That's what the staff is supposed to do, but you need to sort of be aware of what they're doing. They may be totally distracted by their own ways. Oh, it's a free time, we're at the museum, it's a field trip. I don't have to do anything, right? They're not at their work, so they're just, it's great, it's a great thing for them. Now about the blind, you have some visitors who regularly come who are blind, and some of you have maybe worked with them. You have different things that you do with them. I'm not sure what, it's a verbal description. You do some touching of probably metal sculptures, maybe stone sculptures, right? You're describing the object to them while they're touching it, maybe. So it's interesting. That's a very small part of the accessibility puzzle, working with the blind, all in all. I mean, many more people coming through these other avenues. Like I said, they have Alzheimer's, memory loss, dementia, the behavioral, cognitive disabilities of one sort or another. Physical disabilities, obviously, they're in a wheelchair, they're rollator, they can't. The world is like, you know, people just opening their mouths and nothing comes out because they can't hear you. And that's a whole spectrum too. I won't get into it. But that's like a lot of your visitors are going to be along that line. But the blind, there's something about it, something I want to say romantic about it. There's something heroic, right? Examine your own motives. There's something heroic about working with blind people. We have the example of Helen Keller and what a inspiration she is to so many people. You kind of channel some of that into yourself and it comes out in ways that's like, I want to help. I want to be the hero for a blind person. They're few and far between. You're going to do a lot more. But it's great fun and it's very challenging. And there's a lot of rewards in it. But we do some of the same things. You know, we have a number of objects that are clear, about 100 objects, I'd say, in the museum. It varies all the time, really. Things are taken off view, things are gone into conservation, whatnot. But they've been cleared by the conservators that we can touch them. Some are like bulletproof. We have these neoclassical marble sculptures that are really helpful to us, you know. And they're really good because, like, there's one by Horatio Guarino of his dog. Big marble greyhound dog, life-size, lying down on a plinth, you know. And so I just plunk that person right down at the front of Arno, and I just place their hands on Arno's paws, and I say, I don't tell them what it is, because I know they can figure it out. And you can just see them starting that journey. And it's really rewarding, and it's fun. There's a safety net. I mean, it's totally great. I had one guy who was coming, he had lost his sight maybe a year before. Man in his 40s, I guess. Yeah, he came in with his wife. Okay, he came in with his wife. He's recently lost his vision. Stop and just consider the emotional state that they've been living in for the past, whatever, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's this, the dynamics between the couple are all, you know, it's fraught with all kinds of sort of tensions and expectations and wanting to be involved but wanting to empower them, so there's all this kind of stuff going on. And he's just fresh off the boat into the land of the non-sighted. He's working really hard. He wants to just power through this thing because he's a person who was very successful in life. And is, actually. He's still doing a lot of the work that he was doing. But he wanted to treat this in that way, like, I'm going to conquer this thing. Like, you know, the whole idea that we can conquer disability, we can conquer illnesses. You know, no, it's more like we sort of walk the dance floor with them for a lot of the time. So he was working on this sculpture. It's called Nydia, the Blind Girl of Pompeii. This is neoclassical marble sculpture. So these are made in the Victorian era. And here's Nydia, okay? She's like striding forward. One hand is up to her ear. She's listening. She's blind. Nydia, the blind girl of Pompeii. The other hand is on a staff, carved in this beautiful white marble. The flowing robes, her heel is off the ground, her toes, I mean, everything is really beautifully sculpted. So there's lots of places to get into it. There's lots of stuff. But think about what he's doing. He's never seen this sculpture before. So this is where it's really different from verbal description. Verbal description, here we have a painting of two moose in a very open mountainous terrain with a few scattered tall trees and some mountains in the background. I mean, that's really basic, right? A person can kind of work with that. It's like you gave them their eyes. They walk by, they said, check. They didn't even think about it, right? You go through galleries, you think about what you're looking at. You go click, click, click. You get it instantly. What he's doing, maybe starting at the toe, to the heel, to the ankle, to the edge of her toga. Stone, hard stone. Close your eyes and touch something near you like a chair. It's not a chair. It's this hard surface that, it's this thing. What is it? So you're trying to reconstruct this very complicated thing that your eyes get in a nanosecond. So we did like a couple of sculptures in this gallery, some of them quite complicated. We got to Nydia, and I could see him. He got to a certain point. He's sort of working up. I've got him on the elbow, trying to construct the geometry of the figure, right? Elbow, wrist, hand, predictability, where these things are, And he got to a certain point, and I could see drops of sweat. He said, I have to stop. I'm gonna pass out. I'm not gonna pass out, but I have to sit down. I have to rest. I mean, just doing so much work. Now, maybe he came at it with a little too hard, charging kind of attitude. He really had high expectations for himself. But even without that, put yourself in the shoes of, if I blindfolded you and handed you this chair, you might say it's a chair. But who's to say that you have any concept of what this chair really looks like? Really looks like. And what if we fold it up, right? Oh my gosh, it just turned into something totally different. A sculpture, you look at it from the front. Here's Arno, the dog. You can predict what a dog, right? Go from the side. Totally different kind of geometry you're working with. That can really screw people up. So it's fascinating. It's sort of like a little laboratory. Hopefully there's people coming in all the time and you can work on your approaches to things. It's really, really fascinating to work with the blind. Yeah, Katie.
If you don't mind,
Please.
I just had a couple of questions.
Yeah,
kind of
maybe we
related
should
to-
sort of open it up to questions if you have somebody else to say.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions related to the MFA's kind of like institutional policies with some of these things. So, when visitors or anyone, when they're touching these works, do they have to wear some sort of glove or some sort of covering?
Oh, they do.
They do. At the MFA, all sculptures they're using a latex type glove. It's called nitrile.
We
And,
have those. Okay.
yeah, the cotton gloves are sort of frowned upon. Sometimes the guides use them just because, they feel better on your hand and all that kind of stuff. You don't sweat in them. And oftentimes the guide isn't even touching the sculpture. They're sort of directing the visitor. But yeah, the oils,
Yeah.
you don't want those on those pieces. Yeah. So that's a big one. And I should say, sort of as an adjunct to that, there's some sculptures there's one. Okay, it's alabaster, very soft stone. They've allowed us to touch this one sculpture, but it's like one-on-one tour, one person at a time, infrequently. We're going to let you do this, right? So the curator is the gatekeeper, and you want them on your side.
Yeah, that was sort of related.
So there is
to
like this. I don't want to say political, but
of course.
it's keeping the stuff safe. And you don't know. You're just a volunteer. Or you're an educator. I don't know. You haven't studied the chemistry of alabaster and hand oils or anything like that.
Of course.
Yes.
I'm so
No, I was
sorry
just going to
interrupt.
relate another experience that was about.
Oh yeah, no, please go ahead.
Well, regarding your relationships with other departments in the museum, with the curators, there was an Etruscan sarcophagus at the museum. So this is from, like 700 AD or something, Roman thing, Etruscan, that they were in the process of conserving. And so it was off view to the public, but I got to bring my group of kids, blind kids from the Perkins School, into the lab. They did a whole full-on explanation of all the chemistry that they were using to do it. We got to, touch it, the whole thing. Once it goes on view, we wouldn't be able to touch it, but they were touching it. We were a small enough group, so they really catered to us. So it was really nice. I mean, and usually, I should think, you're a much smaller space, so the dynamics are different, but they are your co-creators of these experiences. So, and they want to be on the right side. You had other questions, though.
Oh, just one other. So yeah, you partially answered it when you were saying, different materials based on, the chemistry and things like that.
Yeah.
There's sort of these different policies, I guess, then for each object and how frequently you can touch it and
A few
maybe the way
policies,
you touch it and things
Yeah.
like that. You were saying there are about 100 objects that are allowed to touch. Did that policy only come about when MFA committed to doing this accessibility program, and suddenly there was there's a need to be able to touch sculptures? Which ones? And if so, how long did that take?
Well, I think it was a very
Possible.
natural and gradual thing. The program really, like I said, started out in kind of a reactionary, not reactionary politically, but in a way that was sort of a reaction. You have a visitor who wants to come in, they're blind. Other museums allow people to touch them. Is there anything here? I better go talk to X in, the classical department. Can we touch maybe some sculptures from Rome? And they think about it. They, sure. And then, boom, they're on the list, right? Like I said, the list is very, it changes a lot because things go off view for a variety of reasons. New things come on, kind of because we needle and wheedle and think that we should. Generally, though, most of the touchable pieces at the MFA are stone, marble. There's a number of Egyptian pieces, which are kind of granite and nice and pretty hard stones like that we're able to touch. It's always fascinating. Here's this. A couple summers ago, we got this sarcophagus of Hatshepsut, who was this Egyptian pharaoh, female, and here's this Hatshepsut. She's like rock star, of pharaohs, and here's like her sarcophagus, and there's this really great story, and we get to touch it. One person at a time, being very careful, wearing the gloves, feel the hieroglyphs, find the edges, kind of tell the story. Well, this summer, the curator joined us, and I swear we had 5 kids hanging off it. I wouldn't have been surprised if a kid was inside the sarcophagus and leaning over it. They got like sweaters and things, all these fibers from their clothes, and this, are getting, I'm just thinking is this okay? She was totally fine, which makes, you think about those artifacts, these very ancient artifacts, and you have some small things, I guess, that are